The footage begins in fractured static, grainy, trembling, and desperate to hide something the camera doesn't want to see. A lone man bursts into frame, sprinting down the narrow cemetery path as though the night itself is hunting him. His breath tears through the air, panic spilling from every step. Something follows, something the camera can't capture, only hint at with distortion and flickering shadows that stretch too long, move too fast, and vanish too suddenly. The screen glitches violently, as if rejecting what's chasing him. The next moment is still. Too still. Policemen stand over his lifeless body, where fear has hardened into his final expression. His eyes are frozen wide, locked on a truth more terrifying than death. His hands are clenched so tightly around a wedding necklace that the chain has cut into his skin. Whatever he saw, he didn't let go. Investigators move deeper into the cemetery, tracing the trail back to the grave he disturbed. The soil is freshly torn apart, the earth unsettled, the stone marker splintered in a way no storm could explain. The name on the shattered headstone reads Marielle Wren, a bride taken by tragedy 21 years earlier, her jewelry buried with her by family tradition. The grave looks less like it was opened, and more like something forced its way out. While the scene is processed, a body bag lies nearby, perfectly sealed, until it shifts. Just once. A subtle, deliberate movement that no one claims to have seen. But the camera catches it, and more importantly, it catches the necklace in the dead man's grip. The pendant emits a faint pulse of light, slow, rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat returning after years of silence. A final lingering shot closes the opening, the broken grave, the disturbed earth, and the necklace glowing with a quiet, malignant promise. Whoever took it didn't steal jewelry. They awakened something that wasn't meant to rise. And it isn't finished yet. Subscribe and turn on notifications for more. Ethan and Riley's descent into desperation began long before the cemetery gates. Mounting debts, job losses, and a string of bad decisions had pushed them into darker corners of the city, until even the living had nothing left for them to take. Their solution was born from whispered stories, local rumors, and the kind of greed that grows in people who believe they've already lost everything. Fresh graves became opportunities. Newly buried valuables became a lifeline. Each night, they ventured deeper into moral decay, convincing themselves that the dead would never miss what the living needed more. The cemetery awaited them with a stillness that pressed against their skin. Riley's steps faltered with unease, a quiet sense that the night was heavier than usual. Ethan moved forward with reckless certainty, carving a path through the dark as though daring it to oppose him. Crows erupted from the treetops as they crossed the entrance, an explosion of wings that shattered the silence and left the air colder in their wake. The grave they sought was not difficult to find. The soil was overturned as though the earth itself had rejected what was placed beneath it. The coffin inside had not fully settled, its edge protruding from the disrupted ground. Riley's breath grew shallow as an instinctive dread curled around him, warning that something below them was deeply wrong. But Ethan saw only opportunity. A burial too recent. A coffin close enough to touch. And a name, Marielle Wren, that meant nothing to him beyond whatever wealth she might have carried into the afterlife. When Ethan pried the coffin open, the darkness within revealed a body far too preserved for its years underground. The bride's features were intact, skin pale but unbroken, lips faintly colored, as though frozen in time rather than decay. Around her neck rested a wedding necklace, faintly illuminated by a soft, unnatural glow, as though it carried its own quiet breath. Ethan reached for it with a hunger. Sharpened by desperation. Riley's panic swelled behind him, but nothing slowed the theft. The chain snapped free, releasing a cold ripple through the air that neither man understood until it was too late. They turned to leave, believing the night had remained still. But behind them, in the coffin they forced open, something shifted. A single finger curled. A lifeless hand twitched with the first spark of returning will. The coffin lid, disturbed once already, lifted by a single inch, just enough to break the boundary between long-kept silence and the awakening that followed. Ethan returned home long after the night had sunk into its deepest stillness. The house greeted him with an unsettling calm, a silence so absolute it felt as though the walls themselves were holding their breath. As he stepped inside, the hallway light flickered once, just a brief pulse of electricity, but enough to leave the air colder than before. He tried to shake off the lingering chill of the graveyard, unaware that something had followed him back. The first disturbance revealed itself through sound. A faint, distant humming drifted through the empty rooms, delicate and haunting, echoing with the soft cadence of a wedding melody long forgotten. It hovered on the edge of memory, familiar yet impossible. Ethan moved through the house in growing unease, but no source presented itself. The melody faded as quickly as it formed, leaving behind a silence that seemed even heavier than before. Moments later, the floor behind him creaked. He turned to find a trail of muddy footprints stretching across the tiles, prints he knew did not belong to him. The dirt was fresh, damp, dark, as if lifted directly from the grave he had violated. Instinctively, he wiped them away, but as soon as his hand left the floor, the prints reappeared in the same place, untouched, as though time itself refused to keep them erased. Drawn by a cold pull he couldn't explain, he found himself standing before the mirror. In his dimly lit hallway. His own reflection stared back at him first, tired, strained, shaken, but then shifted into something else entirely. Behind him, in the glass, a figure materialized. A bride. Her gown caked with soil. Her posture unnaturally tilted, as if her bones had not yet fully remembered how to hold her upright. Her presence carried the weight of the earth she had risen from, and the stillness around her felt like the pause between two heartbeats that would never align again. Her image leaned closer within the mirror's frame, though nothing in the room itself moved. The necklace around Ethan's throat grew colder, then hotter, pulsing with a rhythm not his own. A dark wave washed over his vision as the world dimmed at the edges. His knees buckled under the weight of the unseen force tightening around him. In the final seconds before consciousness slipped away, the necklace scorched into his skin with a searing, invisible brand, marking him with a claim he could never escape. The investigation began before the morning light fully settled over the cemetery. Detectives moved through the graveyard with slow, deliberate steps, their presence marked by scattered evidence tags fluttering in the cold breeze. The disturbed grave lay at the center of the scene, its soil violently torn open as though something had wrenched its way out rather than been unearthed. The coffin, dragged partially across the ground, bore deep grooves that hinted at a struggle impossible for an inanimate corpse. The report that followed spread unease through the investigative team. The bride's body, once gently placed within the coffin, was nowhere to be found. No signs pointed toward human interference. Instead, a trail of muddy footprints emerged from the gravesite, leading into the dense woods beyond the cemetery. The prints were irregular, staggered, spaced too strangely for any living person. Something about them suggested a gate broken by unnatural weight or a body moving without fully remembering how. The groundskeeper was the first to offer insight, though his account unsettled more than it clarified. He spoke of a figure he had seen at sunrise, a woman draped in a ruined wedding gown, drifting through the mist with an eerie stillness. Her head, he insisted, bent at an impossible angle, as though it had rotated backwards without disrupting the body beneath it. And though the frost-covered ground captured every other footprint with sharp detail, the figure he described had moved without leaving a single trace behind. The detectives found their first tangible lead near the grave shortly afterward. A glove, half buried in the churned soil, bore the unmistakable wear of someone accustomed to manual work and nighttime trespasses. Its size, make, and condition pointed toward Ethan, a known presence on the police records for lesser crimes. Linking him to the disturbed grave was immediate. The moment the glove was collected, he was marked as the primary suspect, someone desperate enough to steal from the dead, and perhaps dangerous enough to attempt hiding a corpse. What none of the investigators yet understood was that the body they believed stolen was no longer lying still. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss any upcoming horror or crime stories from Midnight Tales. Ethan's consciousness returned in fragments, drifting upward through a fog of exhaustion and dread. As his vision sharpened, the first thing he registered was weight, a presence at the edge of his bed that had not been there when he collapsed. The room was dark, but not empty. A figure sat with her back to him, the long, dirt-stained folds of a wedding gown cascading across the mattress. For several heartbeats, she remained motionless, as though carved from the same cold air surrounding her. Then, slowly, impossibly, her head rotated in a full, deliberate arc, turning until her face aligned with his. Soil clung to her features. Her jaw hung slightly open, as if forced into him by a hand that did not breathe. His expression held the frozen terror of someone who had seen his fate before it reached him. Clutched between his fingers was a single strand of delicate white fabric, unmistakable in its texture and pattern. It belonged to the veil of a bride who should never have risen from the earth. Inside Riley's apartment, investigators uncovered a detail that deepened every unanswered question. Scattered across the ruined floor was a light dusting of wedding confetti, soft, pastel pieces that had no reason to be there. The air carried the faint sweetness of crushed flowers, a scent far too fresh for a place torn apart in desperation. It looked less like the aftermath of an attack and more like the remnants of a ceremony, as though something had reenacted a moment from the bride's past within the confines of the room. While detectives pieced together the fragments of a case rapidly slipping beyond logic, Ethan's world unraveled with accelerating terror. Each window in his home became a reflection of the same dreadful image, the bride standing motionless on the other side of the glass, her ruined gown trailing into shadows that twisted unnaturally behind her. Whether day or night, her presence lingered at the edge of his vision, turning his home into a labyrinth of mirrored threats. Sleep became impossible. Panic consumed him in relentless waves, accompanied by the persistent scrape of phantom footsteps moving through rooms he had just checked. Even when he closed his eyes, the bride waited beneath his eyelids, closer than before. The necklace at his throat tightened with every heartbeat, its chain refusing to yield despite countless attempts to force it off. Its metal felt fused to him, alive, aware, and bound with a purpose he could no longer deny. Each moment pulled him deeper into the terror he had stolen for himself, marking him as the next piece in a mystery that refused to stay buried. Detective Harper's search for answers led through dust-laden archives and the quiet corners of an old parish. Forgotten files and brittle newspaper clippings revealed fragments of a story long buried by time and fear. Names, dates, and photographs hinted at tragedy, a pattern of sorrow woven into the fabric of the town itself. Each piece of evidence whispered of a life stolen too soon and a crime that had never been solved. The bride at the center of it all, Marielle Wren, had met death on the night that should have been hers. Her wedding, meant to seal a future, had ended in violence and betrayal. The details were vague, obscured by decades of silence, yet the outcome remained undeniable: a young woman murdered in her wedding gown, her body interred with care but her story left unresolved. Around her neck rested the necklace, rumored in hushed voices to carry a curse older than the tragedy itself, a relic whose power was whispered about in fearful tones by those who remembered. The necklace, it became clear, was more than jewelry. Its origins traced back to an ancient ritual, a binding rite whose purpose had been lost in the passage of centuries. Whoever stole it became entwined with the bride, claimed by the ritual, destined to occupy a role neither living nor dead could resist. The curse did not discriminate, it sought out the thief, weaving hallucinations and terror into the fabric of their life until the debt was paid. Patterns emerged from the fragments of history. 3 grave robbers had attempted the same theft before Ethan. Each had vanished under violent, inexplicable circumstances. Their final days were marked by the same hallucinations that now haunted Ethan, the same bruises carved into flesh by forces unseen. Each story ended in terror, leaving only fragments to warn the next, a chain of events repeating itself across time, unbroken and relentless. The past and present collided, revealing the inevitable truth: the necklace demanded repayment. And those who touched it became part of a cycle they could never escape. The air in Ethan's home thickened, as if the walls themselves had drawn a breath and refused to release it. Every shadow stretched too long, pooling in corners where darkness had no right to linger. From the depths of a closet, a rustling emerged, slow, deliberate, impossibly measured. The sound crept through the room, drawing the eye and tightening the chest, until the impossible revealed itself. The bride emerged, moving with a deliberate grace that defied human anatomy. Her eyes were pure white, unbroken by iris or pupil, and her jaw hung slightly unhinged, a reminder that death had not relinquished its hold. Every movement carried the weight of soil and time, a presence that had waited decades for this moment. The veil followed, animated by a will of its own. It surged from her shoulders in a fluid, living motion, wrapping around Ethan's throat with an inexorable force. The air constricted around him, pressing on lungs and heart, as the fabric tightened and slithered with preternatural precision. Instinct drove him to struggle, to wrench himself free from the suffocating grasp, and just enough space opened for him to escape, gasping, trembling, marked by the encounter he could not rationalize. Even in his retreat, the bride's power reached beyond the physical. The world around him twisted, reshaping into a vision not of this reality. He was drawn into a fog-shrouded wedding aisle, where shadows of dead guests stood frozen, silent, their eyes empty and expectant. The groom at the altar had no face, a void that made the heart race with primal fear. Through the mist, the bride's presence pressed against his senses, claiming every thought, every heartbeat. Time fractured as the hallucination took hold, leaving only the relentless certainty that the cycle had claimed him. He belonged to her now, entwined in the curse that had outlived the decades, a witness and participant in a terror that would not release him. The night air carried tension as the cemetery's shadows thickened, stretching across the earth like dark fingers. Ethan found himself cornered, the law closing in from both sides, yet the terror that gripped him was far greater than any human authority. His frantic gestures and strained movements carried warnings that made no sense, words impossible to comprehend, a voice unhinged by what he had witnessed and taken. The detective saw only confusion, fear, and the frantic scramble of a man who had glimpsed forces beyond mortal understanding. Even as he struggled, the bride manifested within reach of their world. Her reflection appeared in the rearview mirror of the patrol car, impossibly close yet untouchable. The engine stuttered and died as frost began to creep across the glass, snaking in delicate, sinister patterns. Darkness condensed inside the vehicle, compressing the air, chilling it, pressing against every chest. The metallic chill of the necklace clung to Ethan, echoing the icy hand of the bride reaching across the barrier between the living and the dead. Then the attack began. The bride surged forward with force beyond any human measure, slamming against the metal of the car and throwing one detective backward. Her claws traced the window with sound like shattered glass against bone, raking through the night with precision and malice. The other detective's scream tore through the darkness as reality and nightmare collided. Ethan, driven by raw survival instinct, broke free from the chaos, sprinting into the surrounding shadows, carrying the mark of the cursed necklace and the certainty that escape was only temporary. Compelled by a force beyond reason, Ethan returned to the grave that had become the center of his nightmare. Each step through the moonlit cemetery was guided by visions he could neither escape nor fully comprehend. Bells rang in the distance, hollow and resonant, yet no tower, no hand, and no mortal mechanism disturbed the air. The sound carried through the tombstones like a summons, drawing him toward the site where the past and present converged in terror. As he approached, the world around him shifted. The cemetery dissolved into a spectral hall, a wedding space built of shadows and whispers. Etheric light bathed the scene in unnatural hues, revealing rows of coffins repurposed as seats. Dead guests, pale and silent, lifted their heads and nodded in quiet acknowledgement. Their presence carried the weight of decades, of lives interrupted and stolen, of promises broken and vengeance unclaimed. Every detail of the apparition pressed against Ethan's senses, bending the line between memory, hallucination, and reality until the two could no longer be distinguished. At the center, the bride emerged in full manifestation, her form luminous yet horrifying, the necklace around her neck vibrating with intent. She lifted it deliberately, the chain uncoiling like liquid metal before melting into Ethan's skin. A searing, intimate connection fused them, binding him to the curse in a claim older than memory itself. In that instant, the air thickened, the dead watched, and the world became a silent covenant, until death returned them, the bride and her stolen necklace held him within a cycle he could no longer resist. The veil between the living and the dead thinned further as Harper stepped into the scene, unprepared for the hallucinations that had taken hold. The cemetery, already twisted by the bride's curse, shifted into forms both familiar and grotesque. Shadows stretched impossibly, and whispers of the past threaded through the night air. Harper moved cautiously, sensing the presence of something beyond comprehension, a world layered over reality where the rules of life no longer applied. Within this distorted space, the truth of the past revealed itself. The bride's apparition shimmered with deadly clarity, and in her silent authority, the secret of Marielle Wren's death surfaced. Vance, the man who had positioned himself as protector and investigator, was exposed. The years of deceit, the carefully concealed guilt, all became visible in the spectral light. The murder, long hidden, was laid bare. Marielle had been taken by violence, her life stolen for greed, her body entombed in lies. Vance, confronted by forces beyond his control, could no longer maintain the facade. His sanity faltered as memories of the night of Marielle's death tore through him. The reasons, once buried in rationalization, emerged in raw horror. He had killed her to seize a family inheritance, leaving her trapped beneath the soil, gasping for life as the world above moved on. Every detail of her struggle returned to him, the final grasp for the necklace, the desperate reach for survival, the suffocating darkness that had claimed her. Revenge took form with relentless inevitability. The bride's figure surged forward, reaching with a force that defied the physical world. She seized Vance, lifting him with an invisible strength that bent the earth and the air. The ground beneath opened to receive him, a hollow swallowing that consumed without pause. Dirt cascaded like living water, dragging him into the grave that had been his instrument of death. The earth closed over him with a finality that carried the weight of centuries, leaving only the silence of vengeance fulfilled. The world settled with a fragile silence. The bride's presence withdrew, dissolving into shadows and moonlight, leaving Ethan trembling but alive. The necklace slipped from his neck, clattering softly against the cold ground. For a moment, there was nothing but stillness, a pause that felt like relief. The curse seemed spent, the terror temporarily abated. Detective Harper arrived, steady and vigilant, helping Ethan to his feet. For the first time since the nightmare began, human hands grounded him in reality. The graveyard lay quiet behind them, the darkness unbroken. As if the events of the past hours were finally concluded. They believed the horror had ended, a chapter closed, a story contained. But the necklace was not finished. It twitched, ever so slightly, against the earth. Its chain slithered forward, moving with an unnatural purpose toward Ethan. Inside the glimmering gems, flashes of the bride's face appeared, eyes wide, mouth frozen in a silent command. The air thickened, the shadows deepened, and the cycle threatened to begin anew. A whisper brushed across the night, chilling and intimate, "My groom." The screen went black. Silence followed, but the terror lingered. If you dared to watch until the end, hit like, subscribe, and comment if you think Ethan will survive the curse, or if the bride will return for her next groom. Share this story with someone brave enough to face the darkness.